The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the wooden building marked Virginia City Marshal's Office, and Sarah Norton pressed her palm against the bruise hidden beneath her high collar, reminding herself that survival meant silence, and this arranged marriage to a Nevada rancher was simply another cage with different bars. She descended onto the dusty street with practiced grace, her second-hand traveling dress clinging to her thin frame in the scorching July heat of 1878. Every muscle tensed for the inevitable moment when her new husband would reveal the cruelty she had learned to expect from men who believed a mail-order bride was property they had purchased. The town bustled around her with miners fresh from the Comstock lode, saloon girls laughing too loudly, and cowboys herding cattle down the main thoroughfare. But Sarah's eyes were searching for the man whose letters had promised her safety and a fresh start, words she no longer trusted but desperately needed to believe. A tall figure emerged from the shadow of the general store across the street, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched him approach. He was broad-shouldered and lean, moving with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. As he drew closer, she could see he was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of summer sky. Thomas Everett stopped a respectful distance away and removed his hat, revealing brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. "Miss Norton." His voice was gentle, almost tentative, nothing like the commanding bark she had steeled herself against. "I'm Thomas Everett. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." Sarah's fingers tightened on her small carpetbag, the only possession she had managed to keep from her previous life in St. Louis. "It was tolerable, Mr. Everett." She kept her voice neutral, her gaze lowered as she had learned to do. "Never challenge, never provoke, never give them a reason. Please call me Thomas." He stepped forward, reaching for her bag, but she flinched backward before she could stop herself. The movement was instinctive, born from too many times when a reaching hand had meant pain. Thomas froze immediately, his hand dropping to his side. Something flickered across his face, an expression Sarah could not quite read because it looked too much like concern, like understanding, and she had learned those expressions were usually masks for something darker. "I just wanted to help with your bag," he said softly. "But you hold on to it if that makes you more comfortable. The wagon is just down the street. My ranch is about an hour's ride from town." He turned and began walking, keeping enough distance between them that Sarah could breathe without feeling trapped. She followed, studying him covertly, trying to understand this strange restraint. Her last husband, Harold, had gripped her arm hard enough to leave fingerprints on their wedding day, establishing ownership before they had even left the church. Before Harold, her father had ruled with fists and belt, teaching her that men took what they wanted and women endured. The wagon was simple but well-maintained, the horses healthy and calm. Thomas climbed up first, then extended his hand to help her up. Sarah hesitated, then placed her fingers lightly in his palm, ready to pull away at the first sign of that crushing grip. But his touch was careful, his hand warm and steady without being possessive, and he released her the moment she was seated. They rode in silence for the first several minutes, the wagon rolling through Virginia City's bustling streets before heading out onto the open road. The Nevada landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, sagebrush and scrub dotting the rust-colored earth beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The Sierras rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. "I know this must be frightening," Thomas said finally, his eyes on the road ahead. "Coming all this way to marry a stranger, my letters probably seemed like empty promises." Sarah said nothing. They had seemed like empty promises. They had also seemed like her only escape from the boarding house where she had been living on borrowed time and charity, where the landlady's patience was wearing thin, and the alternative was the street or worse. "I meant what I wrote," Thomas continued. "I need a wife, that's true enough. Ranch life is hard and lonely, and I had been thinking it might be time to start a family. But I want you to know that you don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not going to hurt you." The words were kind, but Sarah had heard kind words before. Harold had been charming during their brief courtship, had promised to cherish her, had quoted poetry and brought flowers. The bruises had started on their wedding night when she had been too nervous to respond to his advances with sufficient enthusiasm. "You can make the house your own," Thomas said, filling the silence. "Change whatever you like. I'm not particular about decorating or cooking or any of that. I just ask that you be honest with me, and I will be honest with you." Sarah glanced at him from beneath her lashes. His profile was strong, his jaw shadowed with stubble, but there was something gentle in the way he held the reins, in the careful space he maintained between them on the wagon seat. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that somewhere in this harsh world there was a man who meant what he said. The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise, a sprawling property with a sturdy two-story house painted white, a large barn, several outbuildings and extensive corrals. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Sarah could see two men working near the barn, their movements efficient and practiced. "It's not fancy," Thomas said, and there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice that surprised her. "But it's solid. The house has 4 bedrooms upstairs, parlor and kitchen downstairs. There's a root cellar and a good well. The hands have their own bunkhouse, so we have privacy." He pulled the wagon up to the front porch and set the brake, then climbed down and came around to her side. This time, Sarah accepted his help without flinching, though her muscles remained tense. The front door was unlocked and Thomas pushed it open, gesturing for her to enter first. The interior was clean but sparse, clearly the domain of a man living alone. The furniture was functional, the floors swept, but there were no curtains on the windows, no rugs, no personal touches that made a house feel like a home. The kitchen was well stocked, the stove modern and in good repair. "I'll put your bag in the main bedroom," Thomas said, climbing the stairs with her carpet bag. Sarah followed slowly, her heart beginning to pound. The bedroom, where he would expect his marital rights, where the pretense of gentleness would fall away and reveal the truth underneath. The room was large, with a wide bed covered in a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the ranch. Thomas set her bag on the bed and then turned to face her, seeming to read the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "Sarah," he said quietly, and it was the first time he had used her given name. "I want you to listen to me, and I need you to believe what I'm about to say." She forced herself to meet his eyes, those startling blue eyes that held an intensity she had not expected. "I know you have been hurt before," Thomas said. "I could see it in the way you flinched when I reached for your bag, in the way you hold yourself like you are expecting a blow. I don't know what happened to you, and you don't have to tell me unless you want to. But I need you to understand something. I will never raise my hand to you. I will never force you to do anything you don't want to do. That includes sharing this bed." Sarah's eyes widened. "But we are to be married. You have rights." "No." The word was firm but not harsh. "A marriage certificate doesn't give me the right to your body if you don't want to give it. I was thinking we could get married in a week or so, give you time to settle in and decide if you want to go through with it. And even after we are married, I will sleep in one of the other bedrooms until you tell me otherwise, if you ever tell me otherwise." "I don't understand." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Why would you bring me all this way if you don't want? I didn't say I don't want." Thomas's voice roughened slightly. "But what I want doesn't matter if it's not what you want too. Love, or at least caring, should be something shared between two people who both choose it, not something taken by force." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, some protective wall she had built around her heart. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "Men don't think like that. Some men do." Thomas moved toward the door. "I'll let you rest and freshen up. Come downstairs when you are ready, and I will make us some supper. Tomorrow I will take you into town and you can meet the preacher, look around, buy whatever you need for the house or yourself. The money I would have spent on your passage and the marriage license is yours to use however you like." He left, closing the door gently behind him, and Sarah sat in the quiet room trying to understand what had just happened. She waited for the door to slam back open, for the mask to drop, for the truth to reveal itself. But there was only silence, and after a while she could hear the faint sounds of someone moving around in the kitchen below, the clank of pots and the smell of coffee brewing. She unpacked her few belongings with trembling hands, hanging her 2 other dresses in the wardrobe and placing her hairbrush and the small tintype of her mother on the dresser. The woman in the photograph looked worn down by life, aged beyond her years, and Sarah wondered if she would have that same look in another decade. Or maybe, whispered a tiny voice of hope she tried to suppress, maybe things could be different here. When she finally descended the stairs, she found Thomas in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He had removed his hat and gun belt, and in the warm light of the kitchen lamps, he looked younger, less intimidating. He glanced up when she entered and offered a small smile. "I hope you like stew," he said. "It's about the limit of my cooking skills. There's fresh bread from the general store and I made coffee." Sarah moved forward hesitantly. "I can cook if you will show me where things are." "Tomorrow," Thomas said. "Tonight you are the guest." He ladled stew into 2 bowls and carried them to the small table, then pulled out a chair for her. The food was simple but hot and filling, better than the thin soups and stale bread she had been living on in St. Louis. They ate in silence for a while, and gradually Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Thomas did not watch her eat, did not criticize her manners or demand conversation. He simply ate his own meal, occasionally glancing out the window at the darkening sky. "The hands will want to meet you," he said eventually. "But I told them to give you a few days to settle in first. There are only 2 of them right now, Jack and Miguel. They have been with me for 3 years, good men, respectful. If either of them ever says or does anything that makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." Sarah nodded, though the idea that Thomas would defend her against his own employees seemed foreign to her experience. Harold had laughed when his business associates made crude comments about her, had blamed her for drawing their attention with her presence. After supper, Thomas washed the dishes while Sarah dried, another reversal of expectations that left her off balance. When the kitchen was clean, he showed her how to bank the stove for the night and where the oil lamps were kept. "I'll be in the room at the end of the hall," he said as they climbed the stairs together. "If you need anything during the night, anything at all, you just knock on my door. The door to your room locks from the inside if that makes you feel safer." Sarah paused at the door to the main bedroom. "Thomas," she said, and he turned back, his hand on the banister. "Thank you for today, for being kind." Something passed across his face, an emotion she could not name. "You don't have to thank me for treating you like a human being," he said quietly. "That should be the standard, not the exception." She watched him walk down the hall and disappear into the far bedroom, then entered her own room and closed the door. There was indeed a lock, solid and new-looking, and after a moment's hesitation, she turned it. Then she changed into her nightgown, brushed out her long, dark hair, and climbed into the bed that smelled of sunshine and soap. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah slept through the night without nightmares. The next morning, she woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in her better day dress, a faded blue calico that had been mended several times, and braided her hair. When she came downstairs, she found the kitchen empty but the coffee pot warm on the stove and a covered plate of biscuits on the table with a note written in careful script. Went to check on the cattle. Help yourself to breakfast. Back in an hour. Thomas. Sarah ate slowly, looking around the kitchen with new eyes. The curtainless windows let in floods of morning light, illuminating dust motes in the air. The shelves were stocked with basic supplies but lacked organization or any decorative touch. She found herself imagining what she could do with the space if she were allowed. Curtains in a cheerful pattern, perhaps. Herbs growing in pots on the windowsill. A tablecloth for the worn wooden table. She was washing her breakfast dishes when the door opened and Thomas entered, bringing with him the smell of horses and open air. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you." Sarah dried her hands on a towel. "Better than I have in a long time." "Good." Thomas poured himself a cup of coffee. "I thought we could go into town today if you are feeling up to it. You need proper clothing, and I want you to pick out fabric for curtains. Whatever you need to make this place feel like home." They took the wagon back into Virginia City, and this time Sarah felt less afraid, more able to take in the rough energy of the booming mining town. Thomas hitched the horses outside the general store and helped her down, then followed her inside. The store was packed with goods of every description, from mining equipment to bolts of fabric to barrels of flour and sugar. A woman stood behind the counter, middle-aged and friendly-looking, her hair tucked under a neat cap. "Thomas Everett," she said warmly, "and this must be your bride-to-be. I'm Martha Henderson. Welcome to Virginia City, dear." "Sarah Norton," Sarah said quietly, and the woman's sharp eyes took in her too thin frame and careful posture. "Well, let's get you fixed up properly," Martha said, coming around the counter. "You will be needing everything, I expect. Thomas, why don't you go handle your business at the feed store and come back in an hour? This is women's work." Thomas looked at Sarah, silently asking permission, and she nodded slightly. She was not sure if she felt relieved or nervous to see him go, but Martha was already guiding her toward the back of the store where the fabrics and ready-made clothing were kept. "Now then," Martha said once they were alone, "let me be direct, because I think you will appreciate that. Thomas Everett is one of the best men in this territory. Lost his parents to cholera when he was 17, built that ranch up from nothing through hard work and honest dealing. He has been alone too long, and I'm glad he finally found someone. But I can see you have been hurt, child, and I want you to know that you are safe with him." Sarah's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "How can you be sure?" "Because I have known him for 13 years, since he was barely more than a boy. I have seen him gentle wild horses that other men would have broken or shot. I have seen him spend 3 days sitting up with a sick calf, hand feeding it, until it was strong enough to survive. I have never once seen him be cruel or unkind, not even when he would have been justified." Martha's voice was firm. "Whatever happened to you before, that is not who Thomas is. Give him a chance, and I think you will see that." They spent the next hour selecting fabric for dresses, undergarments, a warm coat for winter, sturdy boots, and yards of material for curtains and quilts. Martha insisted that Sarah choose things she liked, not just the cheapest options, and when Sarah protested the expense, Martha shook her head firmly. Thomas has the money, dear, and no one to spend it on but himself. Let him do this. Let him show you that he means what he says." When Thomas returned, he took in the pile of goods without blinking and paid Martha without questioning a single purchase. He loaded everything into the wagon, then turned to Sarah. "There's one more stop I would like to make if you are willing. The church is just down the street. I thought you might want to meet Reverend Peterson and discuss the wedding plans, but only if you are ready." Sarah took a breath and nodded. She could not live in limbo forever, and something about the last 24 hours had planted a seed of possibility in her heart. The church was a simple white building with a tall steeple, one of the more substantial structures in Virginia City. Reverend Peterson was an older man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He invited them into his office and listened as Thomas explained the situation. "We would like to be married," Thomas said, "but we want to give Sarah some time to be sure. Perhaps a week from now if that suits everyone." "That seems wise," the Reverend said, turning to Sarah. "And you, Miss Norton, is this your wish as well?" Sarah thought about the locked bedroom door, the gentle respect, the way Thomas had not touched her beyond helping her in and out of the wagon. She thought about Martha's words and the hope that had begun to bloom despite her best efforts to crush it. "Yes," she said softly, "I would like that." They set the date for the following Saturday, and as they left the church, Thomas paused on the steps. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. After we are married, you will have full access to my accounts. You will not be dependent on me for every penny. If things don't work out, if you decide you want to leave, you will have the means to do so. I'm having papers drawn up to that effect." "Why would you do that?" Sarah asked, bewildered. "You would be giving me the power to ruin you." "No," Thomas said quietly. "I would be giving you the power to choose. There's a difference. I don't want you to stay with me because you have no other option. I want you to stay because you want to." The week that followed fell into a rhythm that Sarah found both strange and comforting. Thomas woke early and spent his days working the ranch, but he always returned for the midday meal and for supper, washing up at the pump outside before entering the house. Sarah threw herself into transforming the house, sewing curtains that softened the harsh sunlight, organizing the kitchen, planting the herb garden she had imagined. Thomas praised every change, no matter how small, and asked her opinion on ranch decisions as if her thoughts mattered. He was unfailingly gentle, never raising his voice, never making sudden movements that might startle her. When he came upon her standing on a chair to hang curtains, he steadied the chair with his hands but did not try to take over the task. When she burned the biscuits one morning, distracted by her thoughts, he ate them without complaint and told her they were still better than anything he could have made. In the evenings, they sat in the parlor, Thomas reviewing his account books while Sarah sewed or read from the small collection of books on his shelf. Sometimes they talked, careful conversations where Thomas told her about the ranch, about Virginia City's history, about his plans for the future. Sarah found herself gradually opening up, sharing small details about her childhood, about her mother who had died when she was 12, though she still could not bring herself to speak of Harold or the years of her first marriage. The hands, Jack and Miguel, were introduced on the third day. They were polite and respectful, tipping their hats and welcoming her with genuine warmth. She watched how Thomas treated them, with fairness and respect, paying them well and listening to their concerns. It reinforced everything Martha had told her. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Sarah was cleaning up after supper when Thomas cleared his throat. "Sarah, I have something for you. A wedding gift, I suppose." He pulled a small box from his pocket and set it on the table between them. "You can open it now or wait until tomorrow." "Whatever you prefer." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold wedding band with a small diamond chip, simple but beautiful. Beside it was a folded piece of paper. "The ring was my mother's," Thomas said softly. "And the paper is the document I told you about. It gives you legal access to half of everything I own, effective immediately upon our marriage. Regardless of what happens, whether you stay or leave, it's yours." Sarah unfolded the paper and read the legal language, barely comprehending what she was seeing. In an era when women had few rights, when most wives were legally the property of their husbands, Thomas was giving her independence, freedom, choice. "I don't understand you," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why are you doing all of this?" Thomas reached across the table and gently wiped away a tear with his thumb, the first time he had touched her face. The gesture was so tender that Sarah felt something break open inside her, all the walls she had built starting to crumble. "Because I believe love should be a gift, freely given and freely received," he said. "I cannot make you love me, Sarah. But I can show you what love should feel like, what it means to be cherished and respected. The rest is up to you." "Let me show you how love should feel," Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. "That's what you have been doing all week, isn't it?" "I have been trying," Thomas said. "I know you have been hurt badly. I know trust isn't something I can demand or even ask for. It has to be earned slowly through consistent action over time. I'm willing to wait, Sarah. I will wait as long as it takes." Sarah looked at this man who had turned her understanding of the world upside down, who had shown her gentleness when she expected cruelty, who asked nothing of her but gave everything. Something inside her, some deep instinct that had been buried under years of abuse and fear, whispered that he was telling the truth, that he was different, that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to hope. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I'm so afraid of being hurt again." "I know." Thomas's voice was rough with emotion. "And I'm afraid too. Afraid of doing something wrong, of accidentally hurting you, of never being able to break through those walls. But I think sometimes the bravest thing we can do is try anyway." Sarah stood up, her legs shaky, and walked around the table. Thomas rose to meet her, his eyes questioning. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. He stood absolutely still, letting her explore, letting her control the moment. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "Tomorrow I will marry you, Thomas Everett, and I will try. I will try to trust you, to believe in this. I cannot promise it will be easy or quick." "I don't need easy or quick," Thomas said, his hands coming up to gently cradle her face. "I just need a chance." He lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. It was nothing like the bruising, possessive kisses she had known before. This was a question, an invitation, a promise of tenderness. Sarah kissed him back, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence, feeling something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me a chance. I won't waste it." The wedding the next day was simple, held in the little church with only Martha Henderson and her husband as witnesses. Sarah wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Martha had helped her sew, and she carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that Thomas had picked that morning. As she stood before Reverend Peterson and repeated her vows, she looked into Thomas's eyes and saw nothing but honesty, kindness, and hope. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her again with that same gentle reverence, and Sarah felt the last of her walls begin to crack. They were not gone, not yet, but they were starting to crumble. The ranch hands had decorated the house with ribbons and more wildflowers while they were in town. a surprise that made Sarah laugh with unexpected delight. Martha had sent back a wedding cake and a ham, and they had a small celebration dinner with Jack and Miguel, who played guitar and sang Mexican songs that filled the house with warmth and life. As the evening drew to a close and the hands retreated to the bunkhouse, Sarah felt her nervousness return. This was her wedding night, and though Thomas had promised not to pressure her, she knew what was expected. She knew what came next in a marriage, and every memory she had of the marriage bed was dark and painful. She was standing at the window of the main bedroom, looking out at the star-filled Nevada sky, when there was a gentle knock on the door. "Come in," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Thomas entered, still dressed in his wedding clothes though he had removed his jacket. He stopped just inside the door, making no move to approach her. "I just wanted to say good night," he said quietly, "and to tell you again that my offer still stands. I'll sleep in the other room unless and until you tell me otherwise. There's no rush, Sarah. We have all the time in the world." Sarah turned to face him, this man who was now her husband, who had shown her more kindness in a week than she had known in her entire life. She thought about the fear that had dominated her existence for so long, about the way it had shaped every decision, every reaction. She thought about what Martha had said about Thomas gentling wild horses, about the patience and care that required. "Stay," she whispered. "Please stay." "I want to try." Thomas crossed the room slowly, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure? There's no shame in waiting, Sarah. I meant what I said." "I know you did." Sarah reached out and took his hand, marveling at how different his touch felt compared to what she had known before. Strong but never cruel, firm but never forcing. "But I think I need to do this to prove to myself that it can be different, and I trust you. I'm not sure when it happened, but I do." "We will go slow," Thomas promised, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "And if at any point you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no anger. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Thomas led her to the bed, and they sat down side by side. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, long and deep, and Sarah felt heat begin to build inside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with fear or duty, and everything to do with genuine desire. Thomas's hands were gentle as he helped her remove her dress, his touch reverent as he explored her body. Every time Sarah tensed, he stopped immediately, waiting until she relaxed before continuing. He whispered to her throughout, telling her she was beautiful, asking what felt good, making sure she knew she was in control. When they finally came together, Sarah felt a brief moment of panic, old memories threatening to overwhelm her. But Thomas held her close, his hands stroking her hair, his voice murmuring reassurances, and gradually the panic subsided. This was not what she had known before. There was no pain, no humiliation, no sense of being used. Instead, there was tenderness, patience, and a growing pleasure that built slowly until it crested in waves that left her gasping and clinging to Thomas like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Afterward, Thomas held her close, their bodies tangled together, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for once they were not tears of fear or pain. They were tears of release, of healing, of the profound realization that her life had fundamentally changed. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for showing me it could be like that I could feel that." "You don't ever have to thank me for loving you the way you deserve to be loved," Thomas said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "This is just the beginning, Sarah. Let me keep showing you how it should be every day for the rest of our lives." The months that followed were a revelation for Sarah. The ranch fell into the rhythm of the seasons, and she fell into the rhythm of life with Thomas. He woke her each morning with gentle kisses, and they breakfasted together before he headed out to work. Sarah threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, sewing quilts and braiding rag rugs, canning vegetables from the garden she planted, learning to cook the hearty meals that ranch life demanded. Thomas was patient with her healing, understanding that some days she was confident and open, while other days old fears would surface and she would withdraw. He never pressured her, never showed frustration. When she woke from nightmares about Harold, he held her and soothed her until she could breathe again. When she flinched at sudden movements, he apologized for startling her and moved more carefully. Gradually, Sarah began to understand what Thomas had meant about showing her how love should feel. It was in the way he always helped her into the wagon, even when she could have managed herself. It was in how he asked her opinion on which fields to plant, listening seriously to her suggestions. It was in the surprise of finding him doing the dishes so she could sit down and rest, or coming in from a long day to find that he had picked her a bouquet of wildflowers just because. Virginia City's society slowly accepted her, thanks in large part to Martha Henderson's endorsement. Sarah made friends with some of the other ranch wives, women who invited her to quilting bees and church socials. She learned the news and gossip of the town, about the fortunes made and lost in the silver mines, about the occasional outlaws who drifted through, about the families trying to build lives in this harsh but beautiful territory. By the time autumn arrived, painting the landscape in golds and russets, Sarah felt more settled than she ever had in her life. She had gained weight, her face filling out so she no longer looked gaunt and haunted. She laughed more, smiled more, allowed herself to be happy in a way she had never believed possible. One evening in late October, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Sarah rested her head on Thomas's shoulder and spoke the words she had been holding inside for weeks. "I love you," she said simply. "I thought you should know." She felt Thomas's sharp intake of breath, felt his arm tighten around her. When she looked up at him, there were tears in his eyes. "Say it again," he said hoarsely. "I love you, Thomas Everett. I love your kindness and your patience. I love the way you gentle horses and build things with your hands. I love how you have never once made me feel small or worthless or afraid. I love you, and I thank God every day that I got on that stagecoach and came to Virginia City." Thomas kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and when they finally pulled apart, he was smiling through his tears. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you step down from that coach, looking so brave and so scared at the same time. I love you, Sarah Everett, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," Sarah said firmly. "You showed me how to trust again, how to hope again. You showed me that not all men are cruel, that love doesn't have to hurt. You gave me my life back, Thomas. How could I not love you?" They made love that night with a new depth of feeling, their bodies moving together in perfect harmony, and afterwards Sarah lay awake for a long time, listening to Thomas's steady breathing and marveling at the miracle of her second chance. Winter came hard to Nevada that year, bringing snow and ice that locked the ranch in its grip for weeks at a time. Sarah discovered she loved the quiet beauty of winter, the way the world seemed to hold its breath under a blanket of white. She and Thomas spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, playing cards, planning for the spring. They made love under piles of quilts, warming each other through the cold nights, and Sarah discovered new depths of passion and intimacy she had never imagined existed. It was during those quiet winter months that Sarah finally told Thomas about Harold, about her father, about all the years of abuse and fear. She had not meant to, but one night the words simply started pouring out, and once they started, she could not stop them. Thomas listened without interrupting, his face growing harder and his eyes darker, but when she finally fell silent, exhausted and shaking, he simply pulled her into his arms and held her. "I wish I could go back in time and protect you from all of that," he said roughly. "I wish I could make it so none of it ever happened." "You can't change the past," Sarah said, "but you have given me a future I never thought I could have. That's enough, Thomas, more than enough." "I will never let anyone hurt you again," Thomas promised fiercely. "Never. You are safe now, Sarah. You are home." Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new calves, and Sarah threw herself into the work of the ranch with new energy. She learned to ride, hesitantly at first but with growing confidence, and Thomas gave her a gentle mare named Daisy who responded well to Sarah's nervous handling. Together they rode out to check on the herds, and Sarah fell in love with the vast open spaces of Nevada, the way the land stretched endlessly in all directions, offering freedom and possibility. It was in May that Sarah realized she had missed her monthly courses twice in a row. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, afraid to be disappointed. But when June came and went with still no sign, she made a quiet trip into town to see the doctor. Dr. Morrison confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was with child, probably due in early December. Sarah walked out of his office in a daze, her hands instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have Thomas's baby. The thought filled her with a confusing mixture of joy and terror. She wanted this child desperately, wanted to give Thomas the family he deserved. But she was also afraid, haunted by memories of her mother's difficult pregnancies, by the knowledge that childbirth was dangerous, and many women did not survive it. And deeper still, a dark fear whispered by Harold's voice in her memory was the terror that she would be a terrible mother, that she would damage this child the way she had been damaged. She told Thomas that night after supper, her voice shaking. "I saw the doctor today. I'm going to have a baby." "Our baby." Thomas stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then suddenly he was moving, crossing the room in 2 strides and sweeping her up into his arms, spinning her around and laughing with pure, unrestrained joy. "A baby," he said, setting her down carefully and then kneeling in front of her, pressing his face against her stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Sarah, you have made me the happiest man in the world." "You are not worried?" Sarah asked, running her fingers through his hair. "It could be dangerous. Women die in childbirth all the time." "You are strong," Thomas said firmly, standing up and cupping her face in his hands. "You are the strongest person I know. You are going to be fine, and we are going to have a beautiful, healthy baby. And even if you are scared, I'm going to be right here with you through all of it." As the pregnancy progressed, Thomas was true to his word. He fussed over Sarah constantly, insisting she rest more, hiring a woman from town to help with the heavier housework, building a beautiful cradle in the barn during his spare moments. Sarah found his attentiveness both touching and occasionally annoying, but she understood it came from love and let him hover. The pregnancy was easier than she had feared. She had some morning sickness in the early months, but it passed quickly. As her belly swelled, Thomas seemed to find her even more beautiful, telling her constantly how radiant she looked, how much he loved seeing the physical evidence of their love growing inside her. In early December, 3 days before Christmas, Sarah went into labor. Thomas rode hard to fetch Dr. Morrison and Martha Henderson, then stayed by Sarah's side throughout the long hours that followed, holding her hand, wiping her brow, encouraging her when she was sure she could not go on. "You can do this," he told her over and over. "You are strong, Sarah. You can do this." And she did. As dawn broke on December 23, 1879, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire ranch. Thomas wept openly as the doctor placed the squirming bundle in his arms, and when he looked at Sarah, his face was transformed with wonder. "He's perfect," Thomas whispered. "You did it, Sarah. He's absolutely perfect." They named him James Thomas Everett after Thomas's father. Jamie, as they quickly began calling him, was a good baby, healthy and strong. Sarah discovered that her fears about motherhood were unfounded. She took to caring for him naturally, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, the way he fit so perfectly in her arms. Thomas was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and talking to him in a soft voice. Watching him with Jamie, Sarah fell even more deeply in love with her husband, seeing a tenderness in him that went beyond even what he showed her. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, allowing Thomas to expand his holdings and hire more hands. Jamie grew from a baby into a toddler and then a bright, curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, wanting to help with every task. In the summer of 1882, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Emma Grace, who had her mother's dark eyes and her father's sunny disposition. Sarah had long since stopped flinching at sudden movements, had learned to accept affection and give it freely. The nightmares that once plagued her came rarely now, and when they did, Thomas was always there to chase them away. She had become a confident woman, secure in her husband's love, active in the community, known for her kindness and her skill at quilting. Virginia City continued to boom, and then gradually began to decline, as the richest silver veins played out. But the ranch remained stable, built on good land and careful management. Thomas and Sarah weathered the hard times together, making decisions as partners, their love deepening with each passing year. One evening in the spring of 1885, 7 years after Sarah had first arrived in Virginia City, they stood together on the porch watching Jamie and Emma chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Jamie was 5 now, Emma 3, both of them healthy and happy and loved. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Thomas asked, his arm around Sarah's waist. "When you got off the stagecoach expecting the worst?" "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago, like that was a different person. I was so broken then, so sure that life would always be hard and painful. And now," Thomas pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple, "now I know better. Now I know that love is supposed to feel like this, safe and warm and true. You kept your promise, Thomas. You showed me how love should feel, and you have spent every day since proving it over and over again." "It was never a burden," Thomas said softly. "Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." Sarah turned in his arms and kissed him, a long, sweet kiss that still had the power to make her heart race after all these years. When they pulled apart, she smiled up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "Do you think we shocked Reverend Peterson when we told him we wanted to renew our vows for our 10th anniversary?" she asked. "Probably," Thomas said with a grin. "But I don't care. I want to stand up in front of everyone and tell them all over again that I choose you, that I will always choose you, every single day." "Mama, Papa, come catch fireflies with us," Emma called from the yard, her little voice filled with excitement. "Coming," Sarah called back, and hand in hand, she and Thomas descended from the porch to join their children in the soft spring evening. As Sarah ran through the grass, laughing as Jamie tried to show her how to cup her hands to catch the glowing insects, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had come to Nevada expecting cruelty, expecting more of the same pain and fear that had defined her early life. Instead, she had found Thomas, a man who had gently and patiently taught her that she was worthy of love, that tenderness was not weakness but strength. The road had not always been easy. There had been hard days, moments of doubt, times when old wounds had threatened to reopen. But through it all, Thomas had been her constant, showing her through his actions what true love looked like. He had given her the space to heal at her own pace, never demanding more than she could give, always offering more than she dared to ask for. In the months and years that followed that spring evening, the Everett family continued to thrive. A third child arrived in 1887, another son they named William, who proved to be the most adventurous of the three and kept them all on their toes with his fearless exploration of the ranch. The children grew strong and confident, raised in a home filled with love and laughter, never knowing the fear and pain that had marked their mother's early years. Thomas and Sarah's love deepened with time, becoming the kind of partnership that others in Virginia City looked to as an example. They weathered the normal challenges of ranch life together: droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and market fluctuations, always presenting a united front, always supporting each other. Sarah became known throughout the territory for her charitable work, often taking in women who found themselves in situations similar to what she had once faced. She and Thomas opened their home to those fleeing abuse, offering them sanctuary and helping them find their footing. Sarah could speak to these women with authority, sharing her own story and showing them that healing was possible, that they could rebuild their lives. Thomas supported her efforts wholeheartedly, using his influence and resources to help establish a women's shelter in Virginia City. He taught other men by example that strength did not mean domination, that a real man protected and cherished rather than controlled and hurt. In 1888, on their 10th anniversary, they did indeed renew their vows in a ceremony that filled the little church to overflowing. Their 3 children stood up with them, Jamie at 10 already tall and serious like his father, Emma at 6 all ribbons and excitement, and William at barely a year old held by Martha Henderson, who had become like a grandmother to the children. As Sarah spoke her vows, looking into Thomas's eyes that still held the same gentleness and love they had shown that first day, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the frightened, broken woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 7 years earlier, expecting cruelty and finding instead the kind of love she had not known existed. "I promise to love you all the days of my life," she said, her voice strong and clear. "You took my broken pieces and showed me how to become whole again. You taught me that love does not have to hurt, that tenderness is not a trap. You gave me a home, a family, and a future I never dared to dream of. I love you, Thomas Everett, today and always." There was not a dry eye in the church when Thomas responded with his own vows, his voice rough with emotion as he promised again to cherish and protect her, to be her partner and her equal, to love her with everything he had for all the years they would be given. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. Jamie grew into a fine young man who shared his father's way with horses and his mother's compassionate heart. He eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Thomas to slow down as age began to touch them both. Emma became a teacher in Virginia City, known for her patience with difficult students and her fierce advocacy for education for all children, regardless of background. William, the adventurous one, spent several years exploring the West before returning to settle down on a portion of the ranch his father deeded to him, bringing home a wife he had met in Colorado and starting his own family. Thomas and Sarah became grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. Their home remained the heart of the growing family, the place where everyone gathered for holidays and celebrations. The house that had once been so bare and empty was now filled with the noise and chaos of multiple generations, with children's laughter and the smell of Sarah's cooking, and the warmth of love that had been built over decades. In the summer of 1903, 25 years after Sarah had first arrived in Virginia City, she and Thomas sat together on the porch in the gentle evening air. They were older now, graying and slowing, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "You have any regrets?" Thomas asked her, as he sometimes did. Sarah thought about the question seriously, as she always did. She thought about the years of pain that had preceded her arrival in Nevada, about the scars, both physical and emotional, that she still carried. She thought about the hard work and the occasional setbacks, the children they had lost to miscarriage, the difficult moments and challenging times. "No," she said finally, taking his weathered hand in hers. "Not a single one. Everything I went through before led me to you, and I would go through it all again if it meant ending up here." "You saved me too, you know," Thomas said softly. "I was so lonely before you came. I had the ranch and my work, but I didn't have anyone to share it with, anyone to build a life with. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me love and family and joy I never expected to find." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, they could see their grandchildren playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. The ranch that Thomas had built alone was now a thriving family enterprise, a legacy that would continue for generations. "I kept my promise," Thomas said eventually. "I showed you how love should feel." "You did more than that," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "You showed me how life should feel, full and rich and safe. You gave me everything, Thomas." "We gave each other everything," Thomas corrected gently. "That's what love is, Sarah. A gift freely given and freely received, just like I told you that first week." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah leaned her head on Thomas's shoulder, feeling the steady beating of his heart, knowing that this was where she belonged. She had arrived in Virginia City expecting cruelty like before, expecting pain and fear and the endless grind of survival. Instead, she had found a cowboy whose gentleness had healed her, whose patience had taught her to trust, whose love had shown her that life could be beautiful. The Wild West was a harsh and unforgiving place, but within it, in a white ranch house outside Virginia City, Nevada, a different story had unfolded. A story of healing and hope, of patience and perseverance, of a love that had transformed two solitary people into a family, a dynasty, a legacy. Thomas and Sarah Everett lived many more years together, blessed with good health and the satisfaction of seeing their children and grandchildren thrive. When Thomas finally passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1915, at the age of 67, Sarah held his hand and whispered her thanks for the life they had built together. She followed him 5 years later, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words a repetition of what she had told him that first time. "I love you." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the years of their lives. But their real memorial was the family they had created, the love they had shared, and the example they had set for generations to come. In a time and place where women were often powerless and abuse was common, Thomas and Sarah had proven that another way was possible, that love could be gentle and strong, that healing was possible even from the deepest wounds. The ranch continued under Jamie's stewardship, and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. The town of Virginia City slowly transformed from a booming mining town to a quieter community, but the Everett name remained respected and known for integrity, compassion, and the kind of love that built legacies. And on quiet summer evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered on that same porch where Thomas and Sarah had spent so many hours together, they would tell the story of how it all began. How a frightened woman had stepped off a stagecoach expecting cruelty, and how a gentle cowboy had shown her what love should feel like, changing not just two lives but creating ripples that would extend through generations, proving that kindness and patience and true love were forces powerful enough to heal even the deepest wounds and build something lasting and beautiful in even the harshest of landscapes.